feedback. But my name is Rich from Indie Music Matters, for those of you that don't know me, and this is panel 5 of 6 from the Bootstrapping Bands project. This panel is talking about artist income streams, but before we get started, I'm just going to tell you about the fact that we have the final panel session on Thursday evening, same time, and that is a DIY releasing masterclass, and that will be moderated by my sort of partner in crime now, Ben Nixon, who some of you will know from the band Science and from Your City Festival. He will be talking to Mike Murphy at Ditto, Hannah from AWOL, and Centric Music on Thursday night about all things to do with self-releasing. And tonight, though, we're talking about artist income streams and where you can sort of find and make money in the early stages of your career and later in your career, and where the money is and how it moves around the industry. So I'm going to introduce our panelists and then we'll get going. So first of all, I don't know where you're seeing actually, but next to me, that side, is Daniel Jones. Dan, in fact, I don't think that is, yeah, you're underneath me on YouTube, I can see. But anyway, Daniel Jones is that way. I can't work this out on YouTube, but yeah, okay. So Daniel, outreach manager for PRS for Music, based in Manchester, and he's responsible for, amongst other things, making sure that artists and industry folk in the north understand what the PRS does and why you should join. He also organises and speaks on sessions like this one, representing the PRS. So what he doesn't know about the PRS royalties and how to get them isn't worth knowing. And he also studied at Staff's Uni, so has an affinity with the local scene, Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. Next to me, I'm not even going to try and point because I've realised that like what I'm looking at is completely different to YouTube, but Daniel Fish is, I've known Daniel for a few years. We studied at the same university, although at different times because he's considerably younger than me. But I first met Daniel when he was part of Liverpool Audio Network. And they were putting on some awesome sort of conferences for electronic artists based in the city and beyond. Nowadays, however, Daniel produces content for artists, helping them navigate the music industry, including Your Music Industry podcast, which is on episode 78, I think, on YouTube now. Your YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/Daniel Fish, and a bunch of other cool stuff, which you can find at daniel.fish. He's also got one of the coolest personal domain names on the internet. And talking of cool, my final guest is a former musician turned industry lawyer called Carol Isherwood, also based in Manchester. Before becoming a lawyer, Carol had 2 record deals, released 4 singles, recorded an album, did 2 UK tours, and a gig at Reading Festival. And her band got into a copyright dispute with their second label, which meant they couldn't release anything. So she decided to become a lawyer to try and make sure that what happened to them didn't happen to other artists. So normally at this point, this is where the live audience would sort of clap and cheer and welcome you all. But obviously, the way things are, we've had to move from live to online. And so I'll just clap and cheer. Hooray! Thank you. Thanks for being here. And right, I'll get that bit out of the way. So part 1, I wanted to have this is going to be in 4 parts. We're going to talk about the current situation. First of all, I don't want to dwell too much on this because I'm hoping that I'm sort of quite positive about things, and hopefully this content will be useful to artists when all of this has sort of left us behind. But it would be kind of remiss of us to not talk about this. So just quickly, the current situation, your perspective, what happened sort of to you and where you are, and what's your story about COVID-19 and coronavirus? Who wants to start there?
I'll start off then.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
I think from a business point of view, there wasn't anything drastic from my side of things, as everything's quite digital already, content, a podcast. But the pandemic gave me the opportunity to kind of reflect more than anything, as I did burn out at the beginning, and that was kind of a big opportunity to kind of reflect. But other than that, not much has been going on other than the kick up the bum to finally be pushing out my YouTube content.
What about you, Dan? I know, Daniel, obviously you've done a lot of stuff like this face-to-face that now has moved online, but what other kind of, what happened? Funnily enough, the last conversations I was having for this series was with live promoters and agents. So for them, it was kind of like, okay, well, one day we were doing the job and the next day our job changed to shifting gigs to new. I mean, how did things kind of look for you when this all kicked off, and where are we at now?
So it isn't a huge difference to me because I've worked remotely for 6 years anyway. So I'm based in Manchester. Our offices are in London. So I was kind of used to it, but all the setup for it. But obviously, I don't go out anymore. I normally speak at all the colleges and universities. Had about 15 events planned throughout the north of England, which I've had to postpone to at least next year. We were planning on moving a lot of stuff online, like offering webinars to our members. So we pushed ahead with that. So now we offer about 4 webinars a month that all PRS members get invited to, so they can learn more about what to do and how to make the most out of their money. Business-wise, it's going to have a huge impact on us because obviously live is what we call public performance licensing is our second biggest income source. So since March, April time, that's practically been zero. So that's going to have a big impact on us and our members for the rest of this year and going forward into next year as well.
That was kind of where we're going to take this conversation, I guess, in terms of the impact on income streams, because that's what we're talking about here. So Carol, I mean, same sort of question to you, like what happened and where are we now? And
yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate because I've had clients who completely lost their businesses, but I've stayed busy throughout. I've seen sort of more deals being done than so. It's not actually impacted on me, but it has obviously impacted on some of my clients.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one being live, of course, which we've kind of which is off the table mostly. I mean, we've seen that there've been one or two kind of interesting. Well, as I say, interesting people have tried to adapt, but are there other less obvious income streams that have been impacted?
Well, sorry, go on, Dan.
Sorry. Yeah, so kind of what I touched on already. So live is obviously the big one, but also PRS and PPL, we license everywhere to play music. So restaurants, cafes, shops, either they're shut or they're not allowed to play music because they don't want people speaking loudly and spreading the virus. So again, that's had a huge financial impact on us, which a lot of people might not kind of think about immediately. And then that in turn obviously impacts on all the public performance royalties that we pay to all our members.
Yeah, so does it work in such a way that if the venue decide we're not going to play music, they just stop paying?
Effectively, we've given everybody a holiday, so we know anyone that's shut, we've said you don't need to pay us anything, and then a lot of places are open but aren't allowed to play music anymore, so they're not paying us anything either.
Okay, and what about the last sort of bit around all this? I just wanted to sort of see if there's anything that you've noticed which is on the rise in terms of income streams as a result of the way things are now. Again, the kind of obvious one here being people having to experiment with live streaming and that getting the kind of kick up the arse that it's had this year to become something people consider more.
So on another note on a income stream that's kind of withered, I've noticed is because there's, especially in the electronic world, because there's less live events, less DJs having large fees, of which a lot of the labels in electronic music are based by those DJs and artists. Remix fees and a few other little aspects like that have seemed to have reduced because there's not as much money going around in the industry, which has had a knock-on effect on some producers, I've noticed. But merchandise, I've noticed, do well recently. Even some artists adapting to print-on-demand services, so they don't have to pay anything up front for their merchandise. I've seen a few leverage that pretty well to help kind of their super fans feel connected to their music and their journey as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen, people like Sound City set up guest house and stuff, like allowing, up and coming artists to sell merch, accept donations, etc. for doing, a half-hour slot, whatever. So there's been loads of sort of, innovative or new ways of doing things to try and keep artists having an income, I suppose.
Yeah, we've seen a big increase in our smaller online licenses where people never tried stuff online before, and now everyone's trying it online. So it's not making up for live, but it is kind of helping the scales a little bit more, where we are seeing a lot more live online income than we were at this point last year.
Cool. So yeah, so there are some things that are growing. Sorry, Carol.
I was just going to say, and you've had bands selling face mask merch, so which they didn't sell previously. So people taking opportunity of new merchandising, avenues. So.
What about any sort of live streams? Because I sort of wrote in the notes for this session about Laura Marling, and that one being kind of front and center as being an example of it done right and properly, and then the BTS, who sort of set a couple of records for 750,000 tickets sold to a live stream in whenever that was, July. I'm just interested to know if anyone has seen any that are a little bit more within the reach, because I think there was also, I can't remember who, Billie Eilish in fact did one recently. I didn't see it, but I saw the chatter about it afterwards, and people were kind of going, that's how to do it. But I'm just interested to know if anyone saw any sort of live streams that are perhaps more within the reach of early stage emerging artists that were done well.
I haven't, to be honest. I think the only good thing on the live stream side of things that I've seen is platforms like Mixcloud Live, which have launched, which is the opportunity that live streams actually are licensed, which Dan will be able to explain a little bit more, compared to Facebook and Twitch, where there are some issues with the licensing there, which is good for the artists to actually get paid, especially for like DJ sets.
Cool. What about Bandcamp have just launched as well, haven't they, a live stream platform?
I haven't heard of that, to be honest.
I think it's out this week, maybe.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, they have this. Yeah, there's quite a few people dipping their toes into it, and it's really interesting for us. Well, it's interesting for us who deal with music licensing. It probably isn't interesting for a lot of other people. It's so complicated. So, I was chatting to someone about it the other day, just how difficult it is to license, because do you treat it like a live show? Do you treat it like a streaming rate, which is actually much higher than a live show? If it's available worldwide, is it where it's broadcast, or it's hugely complicated, or is it licensed in every country it's available? So yeah, there's a lot of head scratching that have gone on to kind of ensure that we get it nailed down, because it's going to be here for probably a lot longer now.
But possibly that head scratching happening now maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise. So it's possibly good that that's moving along, and those platforms, like you say, the platforms are sort of coming up, and like you say, Daniel Fish, the platforms are adapting as well to include that for artists. So yeah, okay, we talked about merch, and Bandcamp Friday has been kind of a big one that artists have kind of been able to sort of latch onto in terms of merch. I think, yeah, the direct-to-fan stuff, something that's really interesting to me, being kind of champion of emerging early stage artists, sort of, I guess coming onto the income generation in the early stages of your career, like there's kind of a narrative sometimes that artists shouldn't expect to make any money at, and the narrative probably right, that if you're in it to make money, then you're probably in it for the wrong reasons. But I know artists can make money in the early stages, because I work with artists who do, and it's not loads, but it's enough that kind of means, well, if you can do a launch gig, for example, and make £1,000, well, you can put that into recording or whatever, put it into marketing, whatever. Those kind of little bits of money are helpful. I'm just interested in your advice on sort of generating money in the early stages, where you think artists should be focusing their attention, and where they might be able to tap into money.
I'll go first for the company line. So I'm obviously going to say joining people like PRS and PPL. So if you do that, you'll get paid every time you play a live show, and you'll get paid for like radio play, TV play, if your music's using like cinemas, in adverts, if it's downloaded and streamed as well. There's so many people I speak to who aren't members or don't understand what we do or what PPL do. They're signed up to PRS, but they've never heard of PPL. And it's just money sitting there waiting for them. So just by doing what you're doing, you're going to be earning money from it. So like if you get paid in introducing in your local region, we're going to pay for that. If you play just like gigs, pubs, local clubs, we'll pay you for that. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say on the company wise. But obviously live is a big one when things are back up and running. If you know how to run a show smartly, it's where a lot of the money is. And also if you've got a publisher, also synchronization deals, getting syncs of having your music placed on like adverts or in TV programs, even for like very low level bands, if you've got a good publisher. So there's one next week, like people like Centric Music, who've got the connections with the music supervisors, they can get your music on TV shows. It might not be huge money, but it is money coming in.
Cool.
And on the note of sync, there's like independent platforms too, isn't there, Dan? Like Syncer or Music Gateway too, which people can look to for the sync side of things, which is a great opportunity if they're not signed to a publisher. But I think if in the early stages you want to focus on making the music, as that's a hit track's going to take you further than anything. But understanding the business side of things is important. So to look at artist income, there's active income, so gigs, remix, but then there's also the passive income in the industry, like we mentioned, like merchandise, or even things like content. If you create a piece of content, taking people through the journey of creating an album, that could then be monetized through affiliate deals or through ad revenue or even brand partnerships. So there are clever ways you can think about generating income, but in the early days, I think it's really important just to focus on developing the actual art more than anything.
Oh, I know you kind of, being a lawyer, get involved with artists that are perhaps further down the road, but have you, what advice would you give to an artist, I guess, if they kind of say, you know, we just need to sort of make some money? Where should they turn, do you think, in the early days?
Well, I mean, you know, ordinarily you would say gigs and, you know, maybe press up, do some recordings, press up your own CDs, sell your own merch at gigs, whatever. Set up a website, you know, you can set up a website really cheaply these days. And, you know, Dan's already said it, but, you know, like Centric, it's aimed at people without a publishing deal. Yeah, you know, you can leave on 30 days notice, and they do. Like, you know, a manager was saying to me recently that one of his artists who's now signed to a bigger publisher got more syncs via Centric than via the bigger publisher. So, you know, there are opportunities there. So, yeah.
Cool. And okay, so let's say you're an artist who does manage to get to the point where you're making a few quid, and it's not loads, but you find a few ways, you sell a bit of merch, you do some gigs, and you actually sell some tickets. What should you be spending that money on in the early stages, in your opinions?
I would say make some good recordings if you've not already. Get them properly mastered so that, you know, you can get them out there and get people, you know, so people can hear you, like, rather than just, you know, doing it yourself. Make sure it sounds good, because that's how, you know, people are going to be introduced to you. A lot of people online, so really important.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Carol says. Like, the recording is so important. There's so much competition out there. It's never been easier to get your music out there, but it's probably never been harder to stand out. Like, I listen to so much music, and it's going to sound like I'm a horrible person, but I'll give it a minute or two, and if it's not good, I'll move on to the next artist. So I'll give them another try for him more, but there's just so much out there to listen to. Like, I listen to all the BBC introducing in the north of England, and just so I know who's out there, and I will skip ahead if the recording isn't great.
Cool. Daniel, any other ideas where you should be spending money?
Yeah, so other than the music, I think if people do set a budget for the marketing side of things, or actually reinvesting in growing the audience, I'd say it's more applicable to invest in building your team as an artist, whether it is with a press agent, rather than putting like 50 quid in Facebook ads, as someone with the specialist expertise is going to take you further than throwing money down the Facebook rabbit hole. So I think while it's important to really focus on the music, to also be building the audience side of things too, with the marketing and the press side of things, I'd say.
Cool. So, okay, so where the next question, I guess, is about where there is money to be made, and we've talked about a few things, but I'm thinking about the artists who are actually looking for like life-changing sums of money, and not necessarily to be millionaires, but most artists who kind of have the idea in their head, the vision that they want to be a full-time musician or earn a living from their music, need more money than £1,000 for an EP release then, and a few £100 here and there. So where is the big money is the question. Start with Carol, this one.
Well, I suppose if you're signing a record deal and a publishing deal, then, hopefully you'll get a decent advance, which will give you some money to, perhaps live on. I mean, it really depends who you're signing to, the size of the advance. Because, if you're signing to Heavenly or whatever, then the advance is not going to be the same as if you're signing to Island Records, for example. But if you could get a decent deal, then, if the advance is smaller, you never know, you might recoup and then you might start getting some royalties. Same with the publishing deal, if you get an advance and get some royalties. Again, well, normally, you might make a bit of money from live, but not these days. Well, not at the moment, what I'm saying.
But yeah, it's still, it's kind of advances in deals, get yourself to the point where you're worth something. I suppose the big question there is how you even get to the point where you're worth an advance, I guess. That's the big question.
Well, the thing is, sorry, I was just going to say, the thing is as well, like a lot of people. Sorry, mine keeps freezing, so I hope I'm not interrupting. But I was going to say a lot of some artists have been, really clever about how they've done it. So they've not just signed to a record company; they've put releases out on their own. They've done a really good marketing campaign. They've sold records, and then they've got the majors and other labels coming after them saying, "Can we do some sort of joint venture?" And then they're dictating the deals. So instead of them getting 20% from the major, it's flipped, it's the other way around, like the same with, in a similar way to label services deals. So, I think there's a lot to be said for doing it yourself first if you can. And a lot of people have done it successfully, and then you can use the labels if you want. I mean, a lot of people like Little Sims, for example, have done like distribution deals, and it works. So it's you don't need to. But if you do a deal like that, what I'm trying to say is that you're going to be taking a much bigger cut of the royalties than you would if you were just signing, a standard record, standard PPP deal rather than a net profit share deal.
So you like the idea of the sort of distribution deals?
Well, yeah, or label services deals. I mean, I know not everyone can get them until you've got a proven track record, but a lot of artists have managed to get their stuff out there themselves, setting up their own label, getting distribution, proving they can sell records, and then you're in a position where you can call the shots.
Cool. Daniel Jones, PRS, where is the big money in royalties and PRS?
Probably what I've already outlined already, like live. So even if you're a kind of emerging act and you get a good support slot, sometimes you'll get a lot more from PRS than you will from the actual promoter for playing the show. So we split royalties for bigger shows, 80% to the headliner, 20% to the support acts. Even that 20% can be a huge amount of money. So I know quite a few people who've had like life-changing support slots where they've been paid £50 a night to support the band, but then they've got tens of thousands from us afterwards, like a few months later. So yeah, that can obviously be a nice bit of income if you're lucky enough to get one of those miracle slots. And Sync, again, which I've already talked about. Again, I know a lot of emerging artists who've worked with really great publishers who've managed to get on a big advert. It's Christmas time coming up now, so all the Christmas adverts are out there spending lots of money. So again, it's not something you should probably plan for. I think it's more like a lottery win if you get one. Yeah, there's a lot of money in that, and like writing for TV.
Where are the numbers for that stuff in terms of kind of is it on? Do you have that on the website? Kind of if you're playing a small venue, or if you're playing this big a venue, or if you're playing, and how does it work? Is it tiered in terms of like audience size or?
Yeah, so we have a few different things. So we have what's called a gigs, clubs, and small venue scheme, which is for anywhere that primarily isn't a music venue. So it's pubs, clubs, places that have shows on. We play like a flat rate of about £9 per show. So it doesn't matter how many people show up, you still get that £9 divided across the show. For the bigger shows at concert venues, if it's what we classify a pop concert, which is anything that's not classical, we take around 4.2% of the box office and do that 80-20 split. If there's any classical composers listening in, it's complicated, depends on how many works are still in copyright and things like that, but generally we say it's 4.8% of the box office, and festivals it's about 2.7%. And we deem a festival as something outdoors with temporary structures, so something like Glastonbury and Reading are festivals, whereas some inner city festivals like the Great Escape isn't a festival, it's lots of gigs happening at the same time, so that would kind of get paid like the standard concert rate.
Cool. And the same information is on your site about syncs and the value of that. I know it's on Centric somewhere, probably on one of Simon's blogs.
Yeah, so we tell you like the per minute values and things like that. So if you get your music synced on like an advert and stuff, that'll be like a fee you'll get independent of us, but we'll also pay you for every time it's used on television. So if you're lucky enough to get your music on like BBC One in prime time, it's over like £90 per minute you'll get from us. Whereas if you use on like a smaller station, it's a lot smaller than that. Like Channel 4, I think it's about £20 per minute. So kind of depends on the size of the station and the time of day it's on. Yeah, a lot of it is in the logged in section, so you have to be a member to look at it. Cool.
And is it £100 to join PRS at the moment? Am I right in thinking?
Yeah, you're doing a good job here.
Yeah, there you
go. Yeah, so it's a one-off £100 fee to join PRS. I haven't even discussed MCPS, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. I was planning on that's another £100, and I'll explain who they are and what they do later.
Cool. And Daniel Fish, then, because you've potentially got the sort of the view of the electronic music industry, perhaps more than the rest of us. So you talked earlier about sort of remix fees and stuff, but where, and maybe that's where it is, but where's the big money for electronic artists? Is it the same as bands and classicals? Daniel just touched upon it. I think that's completely different, but yeah, electronic artists, where's the money?
It's a good question. It's a good question because it can be seen as a DJ is totally different than the musician, but fundamentally it is pretty similar, other than added extras like remix fees on top. But I feel like where a lot of the money is mainly in actually monetizing the music fundamentally. But there could be other opportunities here, like a lottery win, like Dan said, where it could be a brand deal with a certain brand. If you really develop your connections with your fans and really build a community and a fan base, there will be brands who resonate with your own values that might want access to those fans, and you might get some free converse out of it and get paid for it through endorsements. There's different ways you can monetize it, but that is more of like a lottery win than the regular recurring income, than especially the publishing and the sync side of things, I'd say.
Cool. So anyone want to chime in again on where the big money is? How long? Go for it, Carol. I'll keep talking over you. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It freezes from time to time. I was just going to say, just to clarify as well, if you do get a sync and you're the songwriter, and the artist, then there's a separate fee payable for the record rights and the song rights. So,
so okay. In fact, last question on this before we kind of move on to sort of how the money moves around the industry, and I guess that's your point, Daniel Jones, to bring up the MCPS. But before we go there, what sort of, just this is about managing artists' expectations, I suppose, and kind of, you know, what kind of time frame should artists expect to be working at this for? And this is possibly how long is a piece of string, but how long should artists be prepared to kind of invest in their art and work at this thing before they should start to feel like they're seeing money coming in?
What a question. Who wants to start?
I was leaving it to you two.
All right. From it's a point of where you see how much money is enough or how much money is to go full time is two totally different questions. And I think if you're looking at starting to bring in money to then eventually go full time, it's best to see it as a progression. So slowly dropping down the days in work from your 9 till 5 instead of going from like full-time one to full-time in music. But yeah, first starting getting money in music of real graft, I'd probably say 2 to 3 years, maybe 4, of just focusing on the music and focusing on building the fan base more than anything.
I mean, I know a lot of bands who are, you know, making their 3rd album and they still can't just live off what they make from music. Just, you know, it's not, but, you know, people have to just do other stuff as well. But it just depends how, you know, as you've said it, managing expectations, defining success. To me, you're successful if you can, you know, get to make 3 albums and go out gigging and people turn up and you've got a fan base. So it's, you know, it's I think it's only 1% of artists ever get to that, you know, superstar level where, you know, they make millions out of it. A lot of people just, you know, never get to that level. But if you can carry on doing what you love doing and make some money out of it and keep going, then I think that's successful. So it just depends what you want.
Definitely. Daniel Jones, any opinions on this? How long artists should be prepared to graft before they expect to see some money coming in, make some money, eventually earn a living from it?
Just what's kind of been said already. It's very difficult. For some people, you might strike it lucky and blow up immediately, while others can take years and years and years, even like beyond a decade, to actually make their breakthrough. So yeah, it's different for different people, really.
I really like that, what Carol sort of touched on there as well, the fact that I think the more artists who have realistic goals and are prepared to do it, knowing that it could potentially just be a graft and it's a labour of love, but that not be something that's frowned upon. You know, it's kind of, I think like so many artists feel like they have to have this dream of this massive sort of gold-plated success. But actually, surely, yeah, if you're on album 3 and you're still going, you haven't split up and killed each other or whatever, then, you know, that can be considered successful as well. You're able to carry on putting art out. But I suppose, you know, there comes a point, I'd love the answer to sort of be, yeah, at year 3, you can expect to be making this much a year, and It's just, it's not like that. It's not going to be like that. But and most bands, in fact, every band's story is different in terms of how long it takes them to get from A to B. So that was an awkward question. Thanks for trying to answer it. We went from something from a year to 20 years, more or less.
But there's an extra nugget in there, and what Carol said as well, isn't it? It's like, if you are trying to go full time as an artist, the pressure you're going to put on yourself is going to be significantly more than if you have a part-time job of 3 days a week where it pays the bills and you can focus on making your best music. It comes along that line of like, how much pressure can you put on yourself that's not going to then make you extremely commercial if you don't want to go down that route. And it's, as mentioned, it's managing expectations more than anything.
Yeah, and it's other things as well, you know, because if you're signing to an indie label, then, you know, the advances, etc., might not be as as huge or, you know, anywhere near huge. But, you know, you're more like to have more creative control than, you know, as Daniel just said, being forced to do something because it's going to sell more records if you do that, when it's sort of really not, you know, it's affecting your integrity as an artist for you to go and do that. So it's, yeah, there's a lot of factors to be taken into account, isn't there?
Definitely. So, okay, part 3, I want to talk about how money moves around the industry. And I mentioned again in the notes here, I talked about Chris Cook from CMU Insights, who I'm sure everyone's kind of, at least on the panel, because I've seen you all at his things he's talked events he's talked at. But he has a seminar lecture called Making Money from Music, and he talks about the 3 kind of main ways you can generate income, being from creating and exploiting intellectual property, from staging and monetizing live performances, and from building a fan base and monetizing the fan relationship, which is kind of everything that we've talked about, really. But I suppose just looking at those 3 things, like Dan, you touched upon sort of MCPS. If you want to talk about that here and what that is and how those kind of royalties are different, the copyrights are different, then yeah, how do artists make money from IP, and who should they be looking for help with that income stream?
Okay. Do you want to talk anything on this, Carol? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the copyrights you're referring to, so it's like there are going to be copyrights in the sound recordings that you make, and then there's going to be copyright in the underlying songs. So, you know, how they are monetized is usually you would assign or license your songs to a publisher. And then, you know, there's the main income streams are mechanical license fees. So if a record company reproduces your song, like makes a CD or a download, then they pay a mechanical license fee to the publisher. If your song is on a sync, as we've mentioned, then you get a sync fee. As Dan's already mentioned, there's public performance royalties due for that song if it's on the radio or played live, etc. And, you know, sheet music royalties as well, like when you see sheet music pressed up. So that's sort of your main publishing sources of income. And then on the recording side as well, then you're going to get money from sales, and then what we call flat fee income from syncs, etc. And a lot of record deals these days, as Daniel already mentioned, there's like, you know, brand rights that'll have the sometimes exclusive, sometimes non-exclusive right to try and procure brand deals for you. They'll take a cut, you'll get a cut. So that's sort of you know, exploiting the copyrights in the sound recordings and songs.
Yeah, so Carol's kind of explained the copyright. So there's 3 main societies in the UK that people should consider joining. So I work for PRS for Music, which rather confusingly is a brand name of 2 separate societies. There's PRS, which most people know about, Performing Rights Society. So they deal with performing royalties. So when music is used, so when a song copyright is used on the radio, on TV, performed live, played in public, streamed, as well as downloaded. So most songwriters need to join PRS to collect that fee, to collect that money. There's also MCPS, the Mechanical Copyright Protection Society, who deal with those mechanicals. So when that same song is copied onto CD, vinyl, again, when it's streamed and downloaded, that generates mechanical royalties. If you're signed with a music publisher, you don't need to join MCPS because the publisher will be collecting 100% of that income directly from MCPS, and they'll share a percentage on depending on your deal with them. But if you're unpublished, just today I signed up to quite big Manchester artists who have got tens of millions of streams, but they were only PRS members. They're unpublished, so streaming royalties. So it's quite an interesting, I'm going off on a tangent now, but it's quite an interesting day to talk about streaming royalties. I'm not sure if anyone watched the DCMS discussion today in Parliament, where quite a lot of musicians were talking about streaming royalties and are they distributed correctly. So say you pay 10 quid a month to a streaming service, about 30% of that goes to the DSP, About 55 to 60% of it goes to the master rights, so the recording. So it will go through a distributor like Ditto Music, or it will go to your label if you're signed to a label. Then the publishing rights, depending on the streaming service, gets about 10 to 15% of the money. So normally we collect that, and then we split it 50-50 between PRS and MCPS. So if you're unpublished and only a PRS member, you're missing out on 50% of your streaming income. So that was a long story to explain. I got a couple of people to join MCPS today because they've got tens of millions of streams and they were missing out on their MCPS income. There's a third society who I don't work for, but I'll talk about them anyway, called PPL. So they deal with the copyright and the sound recording. So it's kind of similar to PRS. When a sound recording is used publicly, PPL collect money and they pay 50% to the rights holders, which could be the label that you're signed to, or it could be yourself if you're a self-releasing rights holder, and they pay 50% to the performers on the recording, and they split that between the featured performers and non-featured performers. So if you're a self-releasing artist, it's really important to join PRS, maybe MCPS as well to get that income. Also PPL, you may be a rights holder as well as a performer. A lot of people I speak to don't understand that they're also a rights holder, so they're missing out on 50% of PPL income as well. So whereas PRS and MCPS, it's 100 quid to join each of those societies, PPL is free. So I definitely recommend people joining PPL if your song's being used on the radio and TV.
People are going to just need to rewind all of that and make notes, and it feels really complicated. I mean, it's quite what I suppose once you kind of understand it, it isn't, but you know, it does seem really complicated just listening to all that, and I kind of know it. So I'm sort of thinking for people who don't, it must be like, what are you on about? But anyway, we will put, I'll put all the links.
If you make him...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll put all the links to PRS and PPL and where you can go and learn about and how to join and stuff. But carry on, Carol.
I was just going to say, you know, you just have to think of it. If it's record side, you're a performer, because not everyone writes songs, but you know, there might be a band where half of them just perform on the records and they would just join PPL, and then, but if you're writing songs as well, you join PRS. So just think PPL is relating to the sound recordings, PRS relates to the songs. So.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah,
that was a much more succinct version of my 10-minute spiel.
No, yours was really good.
It was necessary though, Daniel. Thank you. Yeah. So okay, then Daniel Fish, have you got anything to add to IP? I'm sure, having had a lawyer and the representative of PRS talk about it, there isn't much we can add. But no,
yeah, covered most, cool. If not all. So yeah.
So the next bit of that was talking about live, and we've talked about that already. But and I talked earlier about the fact that, like, you know, you can put on a self-promoted EP release show and kind of make some money, make a bit of money. But actually, the relationships in live that are worth developing are, you know, with promoters, because they're the people who can actually put you in front of. If you do a self-promoted EP launch, you're probably doing that to your fans. Like, you're not going to be able to get on a support slot in front of a new potential audience. So, you know, there's relationships to be developed that are kind of possibly valuable above and beyond just making a bit of money. So, you know, I wouldn't ever say you should only ever do your own shows and never work with promoters, because that would be cutting off your nose to spite your face and not a good move for your career. But I suppose what I'm thinking, at what sort of point do artists start making money from live? I mean, we talked about live last week, and I don't know if we really touched on this, but at what level of ticket sales do artists sort of start actually making some money? Any opinions on that?
Dan's already said that you get £9 from every gig.
Yeah, that's it. Well,
and I put the door money. So yeah, I really think it varies. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. And at the end of the day, it's kind of, it depends on, again, a lot of factors and how big the shows are and how many tickets you can sell. I suppose at the end of the day, the more tickets you can sell, the more money you're going to make. And that isn't just from the tickets that you sell, that's from the opportunities that you'll get. If you can be that band that always bring 100 people to your local gig, chances are you might get slots at, you know, decent gigs outside the area and stuff. So okay, I'm going to move on, and just want to talk about sort of artists who have sustainable businesses, let's say. So they're another rung up the ladder. What do their kind of businesses look like in terms of a split of income streams? Carol, first of all, you're doing deals for artists, with artists. Have you got any kind of insight there on how this pie is split?
You mean in terms of like if they've signed a record contract, how the royalty share is split?
More what I'm sort of thinking about the income streams that artists about. So some of them will be from record sales, some will be from live, some will be from direct to fan relationships. I know you're not running artist businesses, but maybe you kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends.
Yeah, and I'll just say like it depends. Like for some people, like media writers, PRS is 95% of their income, whereas for other people like touring bands, we may only be like 10% of their income. So it does depend on the type of actor you are and the type of music you do as well. So we talked about brands, which we've got nothing to do with, but a lot of people may make most of their money. Like there's a crazy thing about like Beyonce, who makes more money from her perfume than her music. So it really does depend on the act.
Yeah. Or we could all just make perfume. See how it goes.
Yeah.
Daniel Fish, any sort of insight there as well on sort of electronic artists and how the income works there in terms of a split?
Yeah, okay. As everyone said, it's hard because everyone's got their own ecosystem. Someone's great at making syncable tracks, or if someone's great at dance floor records, obviously the model changes. But with producers, with a lot of electronic music being from producers who typically are DJs as well as sitting in the studio 24 hours, there can be a lot of income that's brought in from ghost production or ghost writing, as well as remixes as well. So it's hard to give a specific percentage because everyone's different, but I'd say the biggest income will always be from the music. And when live gigs and everything kicks back off, the live sector is a huge part of the income, and that'd be the biggest aspect. Because you think of the electronic music world, a DJ can just turn up. You might be sitting in the studio all week with just a USB and play tracks and can play a few in a night, compared to a band who has to set up, do a sound check and take everything down. So in the live side of things of electronic music, there can be a bit more money rolling around on that side of things, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. And then, so I've got a couple of questions from, as I mentioned before we sort of started this kind of Q&A section. I'll have a quick look and see if anyone has added any questions in comments, and if there are any, then whack them in there and I'll find them. But yesterday I spoke to a electronic artist producer, and he was asking about self-releasing electronic artists making money. And I think we talked about a lot of it, but he was also interested in what we might think might be trends moving forward into next year. Anything that you're thinking might be areas of growth for artists, emerging artists, any artists, in fact, next year in terms of income?
I'd say if COVID and there is more lockdowns on the cards, which I've fingers crossed, hope not, I think content could play a big part of it. If people find a way, whether it's making their own podcast or doing video content, whether it's the band having an interest in social presence on Instagram, that could be leveraged more to bring in more income in the future, even if it's TikTok or kind of even working with other influencers too. But on the top of my head, I can't think like there is a big pot of money that all artists should go to in 2021.
Yeah. To go back to like the DCMS thing I watched today on streaming with like Nadine Shah was talking. It was really interesting what she was saying about how touring after Brexit is going to be really difficult for acts, and how artists these days have to be different to even like 10 years ago, where you have to be, like she's saying how much she hates social media, but she knows she has to do it. And yeah, you do kind of have to be different as an artist now, especially in the days of COVID.
Yeah, which kind of, again, does put that weight of importance on potentially having some kind of, like you say, Daniel Fish, about the content output, which is which feels really unfair for those artists who don't want to do that. Do you know what I mean? Who want to kind of just be doing music and not actually be podcasting or whatever else it is that you have to do. But I mean, yeah, I think like the whole direct-to-van bit that Chris Cook was talking about, the kind of third pillar, if you like, of income generation, for me is really interesting because it's the idea that actually no matter what happens to you in your career, you go from this label to that label, you do this deal to that deal. Actually, what is going to carry you through and give you that longevity of career is your relationship with fans. And if people love the music you're doing, like no matter what deals you're doing in the background and what have you, as long as you've got that audience, and it does come back a little bit to Kevin Kelly's kind of 1,000 true fans model, which has been held up by some people and knocked down by others. But the idea that, you know, if you've got that fan base and that connection with fans, then, you know, you should be able to sort of weather whatever storms come along. And, you know, I work with a couple of artists, one in particular who have set up Patreon and sort of managed to get to the point where they're making more money from that monthly now than they were from live. So, you know, so there's these kind of opportunities that artists, I guess, in that space of the fan relationship, can try. But again, that's not for everyone. That's not for all artists, because some of them don't want to have to be doing that stuff, and that's fine. You know, shouldn't have to. You're a musician at the end of the day.
And I think it's a restructure of what the musician is as an emerging level, as now having to know social media to promote yourself with marketing, with different aspects. Now more than ever, a musician is more of like their own entrepreneur in their own ways, and that's something that if a musician does have those like entrepreneurial kind of values and those abilities, that's a way of like making the most of it. But if it's not your strength, just focus on making your best music possible, as that'll take you further than anything. Don't feel like you've got to fit into this box just to make money. It's kind of just focusing on making the best music you can.
You know, bands who, you know, one of their mates does all the social media for them really successfully. You wouldn't know it was a mate doing it. You'd like think it was them doing it, because you know, there's ways of doing it without you actually having to do it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're getting to the end of this session now. So if anyone wants to just give one sort of last little sort of sign off advice for artists, any artist that comes to you and says, how do I make any money? Should we start with you, Daniel Jones, and then we'll work round? But yeah, and then we can go our separate ways and think about money and art and how they.
Yeah, I guess educate yourself. COVID's been terrible, but there has never been any more like free online sessions such as this, where you can hear from people rather than having to pay 50, 70 quid to go to a conference and hear. So many free webinars out there. I've been on loads and nothing to do with my role, just because I'm interested in them. I've learned so much over lockdown. So yeah, it's just learn, educate yourself to understand how the music industry works and hopefully not get ripped off.
Cool. Carol?
Yeah, I'd echo what Dan said, and you know, as he already said, join PRS, join PPL. If you put in records out, join PPL, and yeah. But there is so much information out there, you know. Buy a book if you don't know how to do it, or if you don't want to be online watching webinars. So yeah, you can do a marketing course yourself, like, you know, which you can use. So yeah, there's loads of information out there. So yeah,
Use it,
yeah, and go for it. And because it's like easier than ever to just get your music out there. I mean, as Dan already touched upon, you know, what's difficult is getting you know, standing out from the crowd, because it is so, you know, digital distributors, you can just easily get your tracks on every platform, you know, in a way that you just didn't used to be able to do. So, you know, what you need to work on is like how you make your track stand out from everyone else's. What, you know, looking at how you can market yourself, etc. As Daniel already said. So,
cool. Yeah, thank you. And Daniel Fish, sign us off with your posh setup there, posh production setup.
I think Dan couldn't have said anything better. Just to educate yourself on how the business works, on network, and on so many aspects that go on as an artist will allow you to understand where you fit into how the music industry works, and then everything will roll from there. But I think, yeah, education is key, and not just education, like self-awareness to know your own strengths and the band's strengths, everyone's own strength within the band or your group or your kind of like tribe, I'd say.
Cool. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for sharing that time with us and sharing that insight. And yeah, basically signing off, learn as much as you can and do it.